Jake Hendon, welcome to the
There we
Avenue.
go. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It's one of those, mate, isn't it? We've got to know each other over the last few weeks, and we said, you know what? Based on some of the feedback you've already given us, would you be as kind as to jump in on a video recording? Because there's a lot of people out there in the world of estate agency that are considering their options around their employment status and the direction they want to go in and go in self-employed, or they're a part of a brokerage already but questioning whether they're in the right environment and so on and so forth. So we said, based on the feedback you've given, can we jump on a call? So how long have you been partnered with the Avenue now then, Jake?
So only not even a month, I don't think. It's very early days, very fresh.
Very fresh in, about 3 weeks, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. So I launched officially last week in terms of the content going out on socials, but we signed our partnership agreement a few weeks ago.
Yeah, so early days. But you're not new into estate agency. How long have you been in the industry?
So this is my 7th year in estate agency, so quite some time.
So 7 years in agency, and we aren't your first venture into the self-employed world, are we? So what made you go into the world of self-employed estate agency? What was the main attraction?
Yeah, so I went self-employed at the end of 2023. And so I was a high street agent before that, so it was very corporate, which is fantastic in terms of training and implementing the correct processes. But I don't believe there's a high incentive there. You don't get paid for the work that you put in, and there's also a lack of freedom. There's a lot of traditional agency; they're not sort of open to creative ideas and building relationships. And I love this industry because you get to build relationships, you get to be creative, and especially in the self-employed model, there's fantastic earning potential, and you just don't get that from being a high street agent. So that's why I decided to make that move.
So they were some of the key drivers. So from your point of view, then, what's been the biggest difference between, casting your memory back to a couple of years ago, the biggest difference between being employed and then going self-employed?
What difference to myself, or sort of difference within the industry?
I would say both, really, from your perspective. I think it would be a good insight for those listening to hear both.
Yeah, so a difference in the industry, it's definitely the biggest difference for me is the whole relationship that you have with that seller and the buyer. There's a lot more because the volume is much lower, because you don't have that corporate pressure, but also you're more heavily incentivized per sale. So you don't need to do that volume, so you can really have that attention to quality. Is that relationship building? So every person whose house I've sold since I went self-employed, I've kept in touch with. And I know that 5-10 years down the line, if they decide to make a move again, or if they've got family or friends that would like to move, it will be me that works with them. So that relationship building I love it. And it's definitely the main difference. And in terms of personal difference, probably 2, actually. I'm going to sneak 2 in there. It's definitely earnings. Earnings is initially, obviously, it's it takes time to get off the ground, but once you've got that pipeline turning and you've got properties in there, the earning potential is huge, and also the freedom. I don't really like being told what to do. I like to make my own decisions, and being self-employed and going down that self-employed model definitely allows me to do that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would relate to that as well. The ability to earn more is attractive, but the freedom, and you say you don't like being told what to do. We're right in that camp with you on that. So, and I think a lot of people in estate agency, generally speaking, are probably built that way as well. They like that freedom to act, that autonomy, that that decision making, if you like.
100%, yeah. And I've always had that kind of entrepreneurial spirit inside me, and being self-employed, being able to make my own decisions is definitely a massive advantage, because you've got so many people in the high street model that they're not old, but traditional. They've got their own way of doing things. It's very rigid. Got to stick to the process, but being self-employed allows you to get creative, and you generally will see better results if you're working with somebody that is creative and marketing focused.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So one of the questions I was going to ask you was around the initial week, that foundations week, that onboarding week we spent with you. You obviously are a seasoned agent. You've been in the industry 7 years, so you know the job, you know the process, you know what you're doing. So going into that week, did you have any preset sort of expectations, or did you kind of have any question marks over it? It's like, what am I going to gain from this process?
Or kind of, we spoke about this on the onboarding week. I'm very much of the opinion that nobody is ever the finished product. Like we can always learn something. There's always nuggets of gold that we can take away from these things. I was intrigued as to what are we going to spend a whole week doing, but actually I did take a lot from it, and even if it wasn't, I did get some knowledge from it, but it was more the fact that you guys took the time out of your week to get to know me, to get to know my weaknesses and my strengths. And, a lot of people go into the self-employed model thinking that they're going to be completely on their own. And that is, that's not how I felt with my previous company. But with you guys, I feel like you've really got my back. You really actually care about me. You wanted to get to know me as a person. You wanted to know Jake. Not just Jake the agent, but Jake as a human being. And for me, that was really refreshing.
So
I'm not sure if I answered your question now. I went off on a bit of a tangent.
No, you did, because I do think, and this is a feeling, I don't know that there's any fact behind this, but I think for some of the conversations we're having more recently with people that are, for example, connected to other brokerages already, so they're already in the arena of self-employment, I feel like what you've said there is a theme that seems to be coming through, that they didn't really leave their employed role and think about the relationships they would build, the cultural shift from being in an office environment where there are KPIs, there are strict times by which you start and end your day, and there are, I guess, hundreds of clients that you're going to interact with on a day-to-day basis, to going into an environment where you are primarily on your own, left to your own devices, having to build out your own plan. And so a lot of people we're talking to at the minute is they feel that that's missing, that support, that community, that structure. And that's where they feel a little bit disillusioned is the wrong word, but maybe a little bit lost in the process.
Yes. Yeah. Because it is an overwhelming thing to do. And there's it's like the thing you spoke about in the onboarding. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it's sort of the processes that you go through when you're starting a business.
The emotional cycle of change.
The emotional cycle of change, yeah. Everyone's super excited as soon as they make that decision, and then they're like, yeah, this is not going to be as easy as like, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's actually, you got to put graft in, but having that team around you and the support that you guys give, it makes all the difference, because you get so many people that go self-employed that try it for a few months and then quit. But with a network like the Avenue around you, it's, you've got a lot more chance of making it.
And for anyone listening in, you did know what the questions were beforehand. There were a couple of questions I've already asked you that weren't written down, but none of this was pre-prepared or staged. So we want these interviews that we do with our partner agents to be real, raw. This is why we're not in a room together with it being highly edited and professionally filmed. We wanted it to be real and raw so that people could listen in and go, that feels a little bit like me. And if someone listening in feels that what you're sharing is relatable, then we would feel very comfortable that they would then think to themselves, let me talk to Jake, let me pick his brains a bit more without James or Jack in the fold, to understand what it's truly like. And that's kind of the real idea behind this, is pulling back the lid on the business to share people's insights. So what would you say you've gained from the partnership that people from the outside looking in wouldn't immediately look for, if you like?
Gain from the partnership? It's difficult to, in terms of, okay, right, let me start again. So in terms of what I've gained from the partnership, it's confidence, because I had felt a little bit like I'd lost my spark. I was just going through the motions. Again, not a huge amount of support. And then as soon as I've sort of pulled the trigger to work with you guys, there's a whole team around me that are constantly checking, not sort of on my back, like checking in on me, but just making sure that, everything's going okay. Is there anything that they can help me with? So again, I don't think it's tangible, but it's just that confidence and that spark that's been reignited. And yeah, I mean, from recent conversations, that the start I've had is pretty good.
Phenomenal is the word. So yeah, credit to you, because you've done the work, right? I suppose in some ways we've just pointed in the right direction, things that you probably were already doing, but you've kind of gone, got my energy back now. I've got that, like you say, that intangible, that spark. And that's one of the other things that I've found valuable about doing these interviews with you guys, is that one of the big things that's always been really important to me is the people I'm surrounded by, and then the culture within that surrounding. Because you can have a really tight group, but that group be toxic, right? So it's making sure that you've got a tight group, but the culture's strong. And it's hard to convey culture.
It is indeed, yeah.
Really
it's
hard.
It's a sense of feeling, isn't it?
Absolutely. So when you've come on this call, and we did one a little while back with another agent, and I know that the other people that are going to be doing these calls have a similar feeling, and when they convey it the way you just did, it's like, okay, I understand it, I just can't touch it or feel it.
Yeah.
So is there anything that's particularly, we've worked together now for 3 weeks, so it's new, it's infant still, but I feel like this initial phase is probably the most pivotal for so many agents when they launch their self-employed business, to get the momentum early, to have the structure and the processes, to feel comfortable that what they're doing is the right thing. It's great to go out there and do graft, isn't it? But if it's the wrong kind of graft, then it's time wasted.
Of course.
So, is there anything that's particularly stood out for you over the last 3 weeks where you're like, if I could pass that on to someone else that is considering partnering with the Avenue or considering self-employed, they need to know that?
Trust is a strong one. One of the things, again, notable with you guys is that I trusted you guys straight away. I think I've got I'm fairly good at reading people, and you guys are just, again, I'm not being paid to do this interview, by the way.
No.
But yeah, the sense of trust that I have with you guys, and that you genuinely have my best interests at heart. If you're going to go self-employed and do that partnership, it's got to be with somebody that you trust and that you actually feel like they have your back. Obviously, I could talk for hours about all the tools that you guys provide in terms of marketing, the stuff that goes on behind closed doors. But for me, the real important thing is having that relationship with the partners, the people that you partnered with.
Yeah. So that trust element, and that we've got your back.
Yeah. It's, when you feel like you're in that arena, almost you are essentially, you're being self-employed. You don't get paid a salary. You are alone. Having you guys, have my back is massive.
I appreciate that. So I don't want to. This was never about you having to talk about your experience before and why you made the switch. So the question I'm asking now is more around why the Avenue, not what you didn't like. Yeah. I want to be respectful, because the brand you've left to join us is a fantastic brand and a great offering.
Of course.
But it's more, why the Avenue? What was the catalyst for you making that decision?
So I'd say primarily, or at first on initial thoughts, it was primarily the fact that you guys are a lot more established in the area that I operate in. The company that I was partnered with before were primarily London based, and I was the only agent really that was operating in the Midlands. So just having, a much bigger presence I thought would be a big benefit to my personal business. So that was a big thing, and just more agents and in my area, so bigger presence. As I said, I thought would be a fantastic benefit to my business. And then when I got to know you guys before we sort of partnered, just felt like you guys were really trying to help agents create a lifestyle rather than just make a load of money, which for me is definitely two different things, depending on how you look at a lifestyle. So that was an important one for me. And also, I'm quite a simple bloke. You just seem like nice guys. You just seem like nice people, and I want to work and be around nice people.
I love that. I love that. I love that.
And one thing that I just forgot to mention as well
Go on.
is that you guys have really pushed me to be a more authentic version of myself. I felt like I was almost fearful to do that before, just maybe fear of judgment. But obviously, I'm a Christian, and you really, took interest in that and felt like I should, make that a part of my brand. And I have done that, and I just feel a lot happier that I've been able to be myself.
I love that. If nothing else, hearing you say that, I know you said it before, but hearing you say it in the way you've just said it, that feels like a win in and of itself for me.
Yeah, just being able to be authentic and be myself is,
Yeah. That for me personally is a win, because the fact that you can live the way you want to live in an authentic way, a really core granular level, that's all we've all really want, isn't it? Is to be our true authentic selves and for people to appreciate us for who we really are.
100%. 100%.
I love that. That's a really, really nice share. Thank you, mate. And my last question, and I wrote this down. You didn't know this one was coming, so I wrote this down as you were talking a minute ago, because I was like, actually, that's a really good one. A lot of people think it's quite a simple transition, I think, to go from employed to self-employed. There might be a bit of what's it now? A false positive, the beginning of that emotional cycle of change, that excitement, and I've got a massive network, and I've got 10 years under my belt in agency. So what could I possibly need? What's the biggest consideration if people are looking at either switching from one brokerage to another, because it could be very much jumping out of the frying pan into the flame, or if they're considering, like you were a couple of years ago, going from employed to self-employed? What would you say the biggest thing that people need to consider is when they're aligning themselves to a brokerage?
Oh, good question. I could go really deep with this.
Go on, go as deep as you like.
Yeah, biggest consideration is like what's your why, or like what are you actually looking to achieve? Like, how far do you want to take this, and how serious are you? Because if it's just the shiny object that you're after, then you are going to struggle. You've got to be in it for the love of the journey, the love of building relationships, the love of the process. And if you don't have that passion for any of those, then it's going to be a rough ride.
So really establish your why before you do it.
Yeah, and then that's obviously going to be important in terms of when you're considering who you're going to partner with, because, as you said, it's culture. This is a very hard thing to decipher, because you're not going to fully understand a company's culture really until you're in it. But I think a company's culture is really important. Again, the company that I was with before was money, and for some people that'll be fantastic and that'll work. But for me, obviously everyone appreciates having money in the bank, but really it's about creating that lifestyle.
Interesting. So we've got to find a way, because I think you've touched on it a few times. It's really important to me. There was a conversation that happened in our WhatsApp group on Friday evening, I think it was, and I responded to it because I genuinely, when I saw it, I was like, that's why we did this. That togetherness, that one of our core values is together we're stronger. And when I read what was said, I'm like, that's the community, that's the culture we've built, that we were aiming for. And that thread of conversation right there is exactly why we exist. So we've got to find more ways to be able to articulate that culture, because we want to make sure that we protect and preserve that. So if people can see more of it, it will also filter out people that don't want that.
Yeah, of course it will, 100%.
Because it has to act as a filter both ways, doesn't it? Both in and out.
It does.
Because it's really important to us now as we grow as a business that the right people are becoming a part of the brand. And there has to be a bit of a gut feel when we have conversations with people like you, Jake, to kind of go, is this person going to be a good fit for the culture? That's one of the first questions I ask myself when I have these conversations, when we're bringing people in, is this person going to be a good cultural fit? Because it only takes one bad energy, doesn't it, to upset an entirety of a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though we are self-employed, we've got a really good culture at the Avenue. There's a solid team, a solid unit feel. And if, again, taking it slightly on a bit of a tangent, in Christianity, you imagine that you've obviously got loads of different people, but you imagine you're part of one body. And if any part of that body is, is negative or lacking or struggling, the rest of the body is going to suffer. So you've got to make sure that all parts of that unit are a good fit for the body.
Fantastic.
If that makes sense, that was a bit random, but
no, it does make sense, because the way you're a very good visual explainer, you're very good at explaining things and creating visuals. So I could see it as well as hear it. So, mate, good. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to jump on and give 20 minutes of insight around your relationship with us. I think it would be quite good, and it'd be interesting for anyone that's watched this to make a comment. It'd be probably interesting to do this again in 6 months and see where you're at then, and how the relationship's developed, and where you're at in your business journey, and so on and so forth. See if anything's changed. But for now, thanks, Jake, and I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.